All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Cover, our parent book club. Here we have energetic discussions about books that touch on homeschooling, parenting, and so much more. I am Shannon Eves, a family liaison. Here with me are our other two liaisons, Carrie and Anna, and our director of community support, Jamie. Just a friendly reminder that this meeting is being recorded for future use. We would greatly appreciate it if you could kindly consider muting your microphone when others are speaking. So thank you for your cooperation. Okay, so for January, we read The Whole Brain Child, 12 Revolutionary Strategies to Nurture Your Child's Developing Mind by Daniel J. Siegel and Tina Payne Bryson. I believe I said their names. I'm not sure. If you were unable to read this book, it's okay. I'm going to go over a brief summary and then a little bit about what the 12 strategies are. If this does pique your interest, I highly suggest you read the book to get more information about each of the strategies and get some examples on how to use those strategies. So here we have a summary. The Whole Brain Child by Daniel J. Siegel and Tina Payne Bryson is a parenting guide that combines neuroscience with practical strategies to promote healthy brain development in children. This book emphasizes the importance of integrating both the left and right hemispheres of the brain to promote an emotional intelligence, resilience, and effective communication. Filled with relatable anecdotes and easy to implement techniques, The Whole Brain Child empowers parents to foster healthy brain development in their children, reaching a foundation for lifelong emotional well-being. And the first thing we're going to talk about is the 12 strategies and what those are, and then we're going to jump into the discussion. So first we have, number one was connect and redirect. Connect first emotionally, right-brained to right brain. Then once they're in more control and receptive, bring in the left brain, lessons and discipline. Number two, name it to tame it. When big right brain emotions are raging out of control, help your child tell the story about what's upsetting them. In doing so, you'll use their left brain to make sense of their experience and feel more in control. Number three, engage, don't enrage. In high stress situations, engage your child's upstairs brain by asking them to consider and plan and choose. Rather than triggering their downstairs brain, which is less about thinking and more about reacting. Number four, use it or lose it. Provide lots of opportunity to exercise the upstairs brain so that it can be strong and integrated with the downstairs brain and the body. Number five is move it or lose it. Powerful ways to help your children regain upstairs-downstairs balance is to have them move their body. Number six is use the remote of the mind. After a painful event, the internal remote lets the child pause, rewind, fast forward a story as they tell it, so they can maintain control over it, how much they view it. Number seven is remember to remember. Help your kids exercise their memory by giving them lots of practice at remembering. Number eight was let the clouds roll by. Remind kids that feelings come and go. Fear, frustration, and loneliness are temporary states and not enduring traits. Number nine is sift. Help your children notice and understand the sensations, images, feelings, and thoughts within them, which is the SIFT. Number 10 is getting back to the hub. Mindsight practices teach children to calm themselves and focus their attention where they want them. Number 11 was family fun factor, which was my favorite. Build fun into the family so your kids can enjoy positive and satisfying experience with the people they're with the most. And number 12 is connect through conflict. Rather than an obstacle to avoid, view conflict as an opportunity to teach your kids essential relationship skills. So those were the 12 strategies and a very small, brief sentence on each of, a couple sentences on each of them. So if you really want to read more about them, I highly suggest reading the book if you have not yet. So we're going to go ahead and get into the discussion. So which of the 12 strategies resonated with you the most? You can unmute, you can talk. Which of the 12 strategies resonated with you the most? I'll go ahead and share. I really liked, was it number, I'm gonna go back to it, number 11, the family fun factor. I always keep forgetting that we need to like have more fun, like sit down as a family and play games and do things more because we homeschool so much, that we're together so much already. I always forget to like also have the family together outside of that. So that's one of the ones that I liked.
I like the remote one. Were you done, Shannon? I don't want to.
Yeah, go ahead. I was gonna say, anybody want to
I
share?
like it because I think sometimes people, myself included, choose to remember things that are comfortable in remembering and skip over those things that aren't. And the thought behind the remote gives permission for that and allows space to come back and revisit it. I liked that technique, and I thought it might be really helpful for children, especially.
Mhm. I like that too. The skipping over the part you don't want to remember, but then remembering after it was over that it was okay, that everything was fine afterwards,
Right. It gives them
so that
something
you
to
can go
equate
back.
to
Yeah.
with the remote, you know?
I think the one I loved 1 and 2. They right as I started reading this, we had a big challenge with our 4th kid, and I haven't dealt with any of this with any of my other 3. But he was all of a sudden having some major anxiety, and so I think just being able to kind of like talk through that with him. Those 2 strategies, the first 2, were super helpful. And then I also loved, and it wasn't with a strategy, but it was the wheel of awareness model. That's something that I plan to actually pull out with him now that we've kind of moved through, and we ended up seeing a therapist, and we've done so many strategies that came right from this book right when I needed it, which was amazing. But I just love the wheel of awareness because I think he can tend to focus on some negative things as opposed to all of the great things that are on his wheel. And so I went through and I tabbed everything so I could go back to it and like kind of teach him about this. And so we can sit down and make that together. He's also very artistic, so he loves to draw. So I think this would be something that would really grab his attention and help him a lot. So this book was like perfect timing, I have to tell you right now. I absolutely loved it. I've been able to use so many things from it. So
That is amazing. I love hearing that.
I liked the wheel too. I think that that's something everybody in my house could utilize.
I have to be honest and say I didn't read the book, but in hearing the 2 of the strategies were teaching strategies to kids on how to calm themselves. And then another strategy feels like one of those strategies, which is reminding kids that feelings come and go. And I probably just resonate with that myself because when I'm upset, I have to self-talk. Okay, this is not how I'm going to feel forever. This feeling will leave. It's okay, but that is a strategy. Like that one strategy feeds into the other strategy on teaching kids how to calm themselves. To me, that's a calming thing.
And that one, what you said, Mary, it was so like perfect because when we did go and see a therapist, one of the things that she has said that he has gravitated to and that I have is thoughts and feelings aren't facts. Like take hold of those thoughts and those feelings, and we need to weigh them with like, okay, is this going to happen? Has this happened in the past? Like kind of just thinking through that and just knowing that we have lots of big feelings and thoughts in our bodies. It doesn't mean that it's a fact. And so that kind of goes with what you had said too.
You're muted, Mary.
I hear what you, yeah, I just saw that. So like using that as a strategy, teaching our kids that feelings are not facts.
I was gonna say that I liked the name it to tame it strategy. My son a few years ago had flipped a golf cart, and we ended up going to therapy. And one of the strategies the therapist taught us was to just keep talking and telling the story to different family members. And it really did help. But then reading this book, it kind of like the therapist clearly has this book because she was teaching us all of these strategies in here. So I really identified with a lot of the strategies, and I really, really also liked this book. So
Oh, I'm glad. I'm glad it's helping everybody. Anybody else want to share? You can share more.
Can you, I'm sorry to ask you this, can you go back to the slides where I can see the one
Yeah.
through? I just want to take a
So
quick
it's
picture.
on two different ones because I couldn't fit it
Yes.
all.
So okay,
Right.
and then the next one. Got it.
Yeah. I like the sift too. The I can't even remember it all. There's a lot to go through. Oh yeah. Are you hungry? Like going through how your body feels. The sensations you're feeling, like sit there and close your eyes, and like I actually went through that as I was listening to it. Like how are you feeling? What pictures are you getting?
Hey, love, can you
Just
go
like
ask
bring you
your
back to
brother?
present.
Thank you.
Just to bring you and anybody doing it to like back to present right now.
Shannon,
Yeah.
for those who didn't read the book, can you elaborate a little bit more on the upstairs, downstairs?
Okay, so I was actually going to talk about that a little bit more in a
Okay,
minute.
go.
It's okay. But so they do go over, I'm going to come back to this slide. Where was it? Okay. So they do talk a lot about right brain, left brain, and then upstairs brain and downstairs brain. I know that these have actually been, they're pretty old thinking with the brain that that your brain is two separate, that you tend to lean more towards the left or to the right. And then also the upstairs downstairs brain is also old thinking as well. And it's simply the right brain is more creative, the left brain is more logical, your downstairs brain is more I'm trying to think of a word for it.
Initial reaction, like the flight or fight mode, you know?
Yeah,
I think they describe it as like the reptilian brain.
yeah.
Right. I had to look that up. What the?
A reptilian brain. It's the emotional part of your brain, your triggers and stuff like that. And then the upstairs brain is more of your sophisticated brain, the one that you've been developing over time. They say everybody's born with the downstairs brain, and then you're building your upstairs brain like a house where you walk in and the first floor is done, and then the second floor is still being built. So
That's
not-
a great analogy.
yeah.
Sorry, the second floor is just under construction right now.
Yeah, and it's actually not fully formed. I think they said 26 or 25 until well into adulthood. So but yeah, I know I was going to talk about it later, but I'll just talk about it now, that like there is a lot more science now to show that the left brain right brain thinking is outdated. We do need to use both of those hemispheres of our brains to do pretty much anything. But I do still understand that the reason people say those things is to lump things together and make it more digestible for people to read and talk about. we'll go to the next one. Have you tried any of these strategies and how did it go for you? I've been wanting to try that hub one. Does anybody want to share?
I don't remember what particular strategy it was, or even if it was a strategy, but like I was saying, when we were in therapy, we pretty much went through this book. But the part where she was like talking about having a fist, and then the amygdala is like coming off the like I think it said like
Flipping your lid?
flipping your lid.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the therapist had taught my son to, because he was having some anger issues on a separate, not golf cart related incident, but like she was talking to him about like when you're feeling that way, you actually put your hand up and try to keep your hand, like your fingers down, and like just remind yourself that that's what's happening in your brain. And it is actually a thing that really does happen. It does lift off the amygdala. And so I remember like when he was younger, he would like kind of sit there and do this when he was really mad. So, I mean, we did use the strategy from this book before we even knew it was the strategy from the book. So.
I loved that quote in the book where they said, blame it on the amygdala.
Yeah. Does anybody else want to share if they tried any of these strategies and how did it go?
Yeah, I think, and this is something that I feel like I use a lot, is the connect and redirect, and that helping them surf those emotional waves, and just, because oftentimes, it can be my tendency to be like, well, let's fix it, let's figure out, and it's like, no, like connect with them, let them get that out, and then let's see if we can like problem solve together, and don't just write off the feelings, or like, oh, you're fine, you'll get over that, it'll be okay, but just kind of like that. I really like that connect and redirect, and I feel like it can work with all ages of kiddos, even into adulthood. So
I know one I've used for a long time. I was saying this to my coworkers earlier that this is the first time I've read this book, but I have had many friends who have read this book. So I've kind of already been implementing a lot of these without knowing it, just from their advice. But the name it to tame it, and just letting them feel their feelings and like telling them, oh, is this how you're feeling? Or like trying to get them to like narrow down how they're feeling. And then, oh, I'm sorry, you're upset right now. Let's calm down first, and then we'll talk about it when everything's settled. That's one that we've been using a lot in our house. It has helped many tantrums.
I know they also talk about like like you said, the upstairs and the downstairs, and they mentioned about how like when the downstairs brain is taking over, like you can't be logical in that moment. So I've learned that, like when we're having a problem where it's now that I have the language, like the downstairs brain, like we can't add upstairs, like we can't add that kind of logical thinking as a parent. We just have to kind of like diffuse the situation and then go back when we're using both the upstairs and the downstairs to discuss what happened, and it might take a little while.
I love the analogy they gave of the baby gate. It's in the way and they can't get upstairs.
Yeah, I liked that too.
I think I had a moment the other day where I was like, I think my baby gate's in the way.
another thing I thought was really interesting, which was the implicit and explicit memories. And I thought it was so funny when they talked about how like you'll remember things totally different. Like if you're telling a story and then another family member will go, that's not how it happened. That because we see things from such different views and such different perspectives. And so a lot of times, like when we're seeing someone having a fear that maybe we think is unreasonable, there's a reason behind it. And it could be that implicit memory that they just haven't been able to like verbalize or put into practice or think through. And so I thought that was a really interesting chapter too. I marked a few things in there.
I forget what they said about how to bridge that gap between implicit and explicit memories.
Well, what they were saying, there was a whole, it's on, if you have the book, it's page 72 and 73, and they like talked through it. And so they said, when we first are, we're for like the first 18 months, we're only encoding implicitly. And so sometimes even an implicit memory will make what we're looking at as kind of an irrational fear or something that they don't want to do come up because maybe either we're not remembering it correctly or it brought feelings, but then we worked through them, but we are only remembering what that implicit memory brought to us. And so they were saying like talking through it and just figuring out ways that we can it's because certain words or certain experiences will trigger things, and so figuring out how to work through those triggers. And so that, the whole story on 73 and 74 was really good. It was a fear of swimming lessons that her son had. Yeah, that was it. And so then they talked through it and, well, why do you feel like this? Oh, remember when this happened? And so then he could remember because he wasn't remembering all of the memory that had happened. He was remembering one fear that happened. But since then, he'd moved past that and he'd gone to other swimming lessons and loved it. But he was kind of stuck on that one implicit memory of a bad experience that he had had. So bringing those memories to light and talking about them and remembering them correctly and making them explicit from implicit was what they talked about on that.
That was also with the boy who had a knife or something, and
yes,
and they kept saying the father kept bringing it back up and going back to, well, remember when he came home and everything was okay.
Yeah, it was like that fast forward and rewind. I'd never heard of doing that before. That was a really cool one. I think you mentioned that, Carrie. How you can help them remember, and then there's like fast forward. Okay, let's go to the good parts, and that was really cool.
Kill the butterflies. Yeah. I like that the mom was like, can we think of maybe liberate the butterflies? And he's like, no.
As a mom of 4 boys, that made me laugh. I was like, yep, that's pretty much what we'd have to go with.
Move to this one. What is a strategy that you disagreed with and will not be using? This is where I was actually going to bring up the whole right brain, left brain, but I already talked about that. So, is there any strategies that you disagreed with?
I personally thought they all made a lot of great common sense.
Yeah.
I think personally how to apply it to young adult children, under 25, but yet still an adult would be, like we discussed earlier, would be a real helpful read.
I think the only thing is, and I don't disagree with it, but that just having to tell myself that the hub theory is going to take time for them to even implement that. I don't even know adults that could fully do that all. I know I need to work on that one myself. But the hub is where I think, Erin, you were talking about it, where you're at the center and you have the wheel spokes out, and you have like everything that you're focused on right now around you, and learning to focus on what you want and making yourself less anxious or nervous or upset by focusing on what you want and not solely on the thing that's making you feel anxious.
Yeah, it seems like it could be hard to do. I want to try it because I feel like so many times when they're stuck in that difficult thing, or when there's something that's negative they're focusing on, it can be hard to get the focus on anything else. And I feel like, that's something that I feel like would be a really good thing to try with mine. So we'll see, but it seems difficult because you're right, Shannon. I find myself like, I was thinking about all the irrational things that I will tell myself that then I can go back and go, come on, that's not really.
Like my whole wheel will be just stuff that's upsetting, like
right.
Yeah. I definitely want to do this. I have a 14-year-old with my older daughter. And maybe start doing it slowly with my younger kids, but I really think my 14-year-old would benefit from it.
Yeah, I think the one thing I kept thinking of, and it's not so much a disagreement, but it's just the level of like emotional intelligence I think someone needs to have. And I think, I said to the ladies earlier when we were getting ready for this, was just having your own metacognitive awareness of your own processes and your own reactions, and really developing yourself and your emotional intelligence and sophistication to manage how you're going through these interactions with small people. It takes a lot of work. Like, I think it's not as much, sorry, kids coughing in the background. That's why it was on my camera off. But I think that's why I kind of hesitated on some of these strategies, because it's not as simple as like, oh, I'm just going to try these strategies. There's a lot of work you have to do yourself first, and I think it made me excited about some of the other books that we have coming up in the spring on emotional intelligence. I'm like, wait, we should have reversed the order of these.
Yeah. This one actually goes well into the next two books, or it's 3 books for next month, but you can pick and choose, and I'll share with you later. But one of them is how to talk so your kids will listen, and how to listen so your kids will talk. And then there's also the teen version of that book. A lot of times these are actually sold together. I'm not sure if the authors like know each other and work together or something, but they do sell it in a bundle. But I think they'll pair very well going from this book to that book. But yeah, I agree with you, Jamie, that like it's a lot of I feel like you might have to be an MD and a PhD to remember to do all of these things. Okay, and the last question I have for everybody, and we might need therapy after this: how might these concepts have made a difference in your own childhood? Sorry.
I think we might need a few more sessions to go over this topic completely.
Yeah, I think they would have been great, but yeah. Nobody?
Sorry, I'll just jump in really quick. And as I said, in our little pre-meeting, yeah, this is definitely a very different approach than many of his, in the late 80s may have experienced. We were calling it the, just push kids out and just, let them fend for themselves kind of approach. There wasn't a lot of empathy or sympathy for the emotional journey of children at that time. It's like, was just kind of like the sink or swim, kind of thing. So I'm grateful, and I'm really appreciative, and I'm hearing so many voices about saying, oh, well, and I took my child to therapy. I know I've taken my child to therapy. I am so grateful that we are so open to that, and we're making use of those resources. It makes me a little emotional, wanting to protect children, and just do the best for them. So, yeah, I think it's a world of difference, certainly in my own experience. And I'm just very grateful in how hard everyone here is working to change that script. This is great.
Yeah, I think a lot of our own childhood has been what brought about this, that there needed to be something different. Because I know our parents' generation and the few and like before, they were pretty much all similar in how they treated children. And then ours has decided since then to that we're going to change this. So I appreciate that part.
I even think it goes even closer. The way I handle my first child is different from my second child. And it's not like, oh, I'm harder on one, but it was my first kid. You're learning how to engage with them. And my daughter in her preteen started doing the same things that my son was doing. And kind of getting upset, teenage, you did this, mom, you did that, mom, my life is ruined, blah, blah, blah. And I'm listening, and he's in the car now as an 18-year-old, 19-year-old listening. And he's like, that was me, word for word. I said those things.
Did you
And
get the
he's
apology yet?
listening, and he's listening on how I talked to her. And he's like, you did that differently. And I'm like, yes, because I learned. And you and I could have done things different. And the best thing for me to do is to learn from that and to try another concept with her. I said, but my values stayed the same. My this stayed the same, right? And he's like, yeah, you just the way we did it was different. So I'm just, yes, the question is, what would have helped in your childhood, but even from child to child, you learn, like, okay, our kids are different, right? One of them, like, even when we talk about disciplining my kid, I'm like, I can't discipline you the same way I do your sister, because if I take away her video game, she's like, who cares? If I take away yours, it's life ending. So I'm like, just discipline is different. And even the way we communicate has to be different, because she takes in things differently than you did. So, but as his observation, the things that we hold dear, the values, the respect, those stay the same. It's just making sure that I convey it differently in ways that she can understand better. And one day at a time, we're learning and we're growing. And I always tell my kids, the best part about making a mistake is learning how to fix it. If I can fix it for the next time, I'm sorry, I will apologize, but let's learn from it. Another thing we were talking as I was listening, it was amazing as we're kind of talking about therapy, is one of the therapists told me, you're regulating your child's emotion. So your height of anger can bring up theirs, but being calm, being that heartbeat, meaning a constant, like, rhythmic heartbeat, can help diffuse and bring down. And that's one thing that I've learned that I can do now that wasn't done for me growing up, is, like, hold them and I'll breathe for them when they're and they're just in their high moment. I will just,
I think
and
your
just,
therapist read the book too, because that's
well,
in
you
the
see,
book.
yeah. And
Yeah.
that's where I'm just like, okay, then I'm not doing too bad, right? You kind of read it, you're like, okay, I'm kind of there. I'm not perfect, but I'm kind of there. So I love those little tidbits of, like, okay, I'm kind of on the right track. So you're just learning how to be better than the generation before you, who learned to try to be better from the generation before them.
Yeah. And my oldest mentioned the other day that if I do snap, I turn around now and I apologize, where when she was little, that didn't happen. So I was like, I'm learning. And she's like, it's not fair. Yeah, I've learned quite a few parenting tips from TikTok lately, so of all places.
I think that comparison thing never really changes. My
Mm.
kids are in their 20s and I still get, well, you never did that to me or for me.
I do that with my mom still now, with my youngest. Yeah. And you were talking about, Anna, how your son and you were talking about how you discipline them differently, or he was looking back like saying that was me. I did that with my sister. She was a teenager and I had just like left the house and was an adult, and she was being a teenager, and I turned to my mom and I went, I am so sorry for being like that. That's why I asked, did you get the apology yet?
I did. I did. You're right. He was like, whoa, that's how and I'm like, word for word, buddy, word for word. I'm stronger now because I didn't take offense to it. When it was my first kid, it hurt me. Like, oh my God, I'm a horrible mom. I mean, I had to, like, rethink everything. And then after the second time, I'm like, okay, those are feelings, not facts. So that was really poignant to learn and to just kind of remind myself of those things. So yeah.
Which lends itself to the brain isn't really fully developed till the late 20s, which explained a lot, like very rare instances of flipping the table, flipping the board game over out of frustration. And as a parent, you're just like, where the heck did that come from? What is that about? And understanding in the comment, following up on your comment about feelings, they're temporary, they pass. And then later once they have passed, you can go back and revisit and say, you know, what maybe it prompted this, or what sort of memory did it trigger for you?
That's so funny. And talking about, the apology from your children. I remember a very distinct moment. I think it was 22, 23, and my mother thanked me. And she was like, I am so glad and so grateful that you're not a teenager anymore and you've gotten over it. Like, it was like, thank you for getting over like all of that craziness. But it really is like till that mid-20s until you genuinely mature. And I felt it in myself as a young person, kind of that shift in how I perceive the world. And I never really considered how that connects to your brain development.
My mom had this newspaper article that was on her fridge forever that was from her mother, that was talking about how when your kids turn a certain age, they are replaced by a pod person. And they don't come back until their 20s. And they like switch places again. That they're just completely different people. And don't worry, it's not your fault. They've been changed into a pod person. It was like this really old newspaper clipping. And it was hilarious because when I did apologize, she was like, it's that time. She's come back. Okay, I want to share this one before we end. So our next cover to cover, like I mentioned earlier, will have 3 options, and that's just so that you can choose which one works better for you. You don't have to read all 3 of them. So it is how to talk to your kids. How to talk so your kids will listen, and how to listen so your kids will talk, or teens, whichever. I know I'm probably gonna read both of those. And then the alternative is crucial conversations. Like I said, you can read all of them or just one of them. In March, we're going to be hitting spring. So we're going to talk about the book Project-Based Homeschooling and Project-Based Learning. And then in April, we're going to get outside with Balanced and Barefoot. And an alternative would be that you can read is Grow Wild. That one's a pretty hefty one, so you don't have to read all of it. Yeah, so those are our next book reads. They're all on the 2nd Tuesday of the month. And then thank you so very much for being here and discussing this book with us. I hope to see you guys our next book club. And with that, I'm going to pause the recording. Stop the recording.